He raised his glass, looked straight at me from across the crowd, and said it loud enough for everyone to hear. And there he is, my eldest son, still playing soldier while the rest of us build the future. People laughed, wine glasses clinked. Someone clapped him on the back. And I just stood there, frozen, a polite smile on my face and a storm building behind my eyes. My name is William Hart. I'm 36, and tonight I'm just another wedding guest in a black suit, standing quietly in the corner while my younger brother shines like the center of the universe. It's his wedding, his big day, the one my father is treating like a corporate gala. Brian Hart, Wharton grad, CFO of Hart Tech, heir to $1 billion defense tech company. And me? I'm the lowly soldier. That's how my father always says it, like a punchline with a straight face. What no one in this hall knows, what my own family refuses to acknowledge, is that I am a major general in the United States Army. I direct joint cyber operations for defense intelligence. I sign off on contracts worth more than anyone in this room has ever seen. I lead war games the public doesn't even know exist, but tonight I'm not in uniform, no ribbons, no stars, just a son at a wedding. Uninvited to speak, unacknowledged beyond the punchline. The ballroom is a cathedral of wealth. Golden chandeliers, endless champagne, a string quartet playing something elegant and unrecognizable. My table is near the kitchen doors. I had to ask 3 servers before I found it. Table 26, out of 30. As I sit, I catch a glance from someone across the room. A family friend, maybe. She leans toward the woman next to her and says it with a smirk, not even trying to whisper. That's William, the one in the army. Can you believe it? They laugh. Not cruelly, just carelessly. As if my life, my rank, my service are a charming eccentricity, a quirky rebellion from a boy who could have been someone. My brother Brian stands at the front, giving a speech. Everyone listens. My father stands beside him, beaming. The same father who told me, when I declined to join the company, that I was wasting my potential. "You'll come back when you're done with the games," he said. That was 12 years ago. I fought cyber wars across continents, briefed NATO generals, testified before Senate intelligence. My name never made headlines, but that's by design. My job is the kind that never reaches the public. Quiet power, absolute precision. And yet to him, I'm still a boy in fatigues playing with radios. Brian makes a joke about our childhood. Everyone laughs. My father gestures again toward me. And let's not forget my other son, serving somewhere far away, probably learning how to make his own bed. More laughter. This time it stings. Not because it's cruel, but because it's small, so painfully small. That's what they think of me, not the leader of a top-secret cyber defense initiative, not the man who once shut down a terrorist cell from across the globe with nothing but a keyboard. Just a soldier. I glance at the exit, consider walking out, but then it happens. A tall man in a formal Army service uniform enters the room. Silver clusters on his shoulders, distinguished service medals, a voice that carries even when soft. Colonel James Whitaker. He walks straight through the crowd, heads turn. Conversations pause. Even the band softens their notes. He stops at my table, stands at attention, and salutes. "Major General Hart," he says, clear and loud. "An honor to see you, sir." The room goes dead silent. Every head turns. Every eye falls on me. I rise slowly, returning the salute with steady composure. "Good to see you, Colonel," I reply. Whitaker smiles, his voice warm but professional. "Didn't expect to see you here, sir. The General Staff thought you were still overseas." "I made it back for the weekend," I say. "Family event." He nods. Of course. Well, sir, on behalf of the team, thank you again for your leadership on Operation Sentinel. We couldn't have done it without you. My father's wine glass trembles in his hand. Brian stares like he's trying to process a foreign language. The crowd begins whispering, low, confused, stunned. Whitaker gives a sharp nod, then turns and leaves as quickly as he arrived. I sit back down, and suddenly, no one is laughing. No one says, "lowly soldier." No one says anything at all. In that moment, I don't need applause. I don't need validation. I don't need them to understand, but they will. Because in 3 days, I'll walk into the boardroom of Heart Tech, uniform on, rank displayed, and hold the fate of their most important defense contract in my hands. Tonight, I was the joke. Next week, I'll be the one making decisions. Like this story? Hit the like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. The rain beat down in steady rhythm as I stepped out of the cab and into the fortified gates of Fort Archer Cyber Command. 20 hours ago, I was a lowly soldier at a wedding banquet. Now, I was back where I belonged, where I didn't have to prove anything. "Welcome back, General Hart," the gate officer said, saluting smartly. He didn't hesitate, didn't question. He knew exactly who I was. I nodded, returning the salute. "Anything urgent come in while I was away?" "Yes, sir. Colonel Langley said to meet in Ops Brief Room 3A. Something about Helios." Helios. The name stopped me for a fraction of a second. Project Helios was the largest upcoming cyber defense initiative in U.S. history, an integrated AI-driven security infrastructure for military, domestic, and allied systems. A contract worth billions. A contract Heart Tech, my family's company, was aggressively pursuing, and I had just been handed the top decision-making authority for it. I made my way through the base's central corridor. White walls, soft footfalls, glass panels hiding teams working on national secrets. Familiar, efficient, clean. Unlike the noise, the glitter, and the sneers of the wedding. Colonel Langley waited by the screen in room 3A, tapping data into a touch console. He looked up and straightened as I entered. "General, good timing. We've finished the analysis." I sat, adjusting my cuffs. "What did you find?" He brought up a financial overlay on the large screen. A digital maze of budget flows, vendor IDs, and red-flagged expenditures. "We flagged anomalies in the Heart Tech bid," he said. "Not illegal, not yet, but sloppy. $61 million routed through a Singapore holding company marked for development and testing. No deliverables attached, no personnel logged." I leaned forward. "Who signed off?" He brought up the document. The e-signature was clear. Brian Hart, CFO. A deep, slow breath filled my chest. This wasn't just corporate negligence. This was Brian making mistakes, sloppy ones, on a project that would define national defense policy for a generation. Langley shifted uneasily. "You want me to escalate to the oversight office?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I'll handle it personally." He nodded, visibly relieved. "Understood." I left the room, walking down the long, quiet hallway toward my office. Framed on the wall were photos of each operation I'd led: Sentinel, White Veil, Ghost Grid. In one, I stood between 2 NATO generals, receiving a commendation with my name etched in gold on the plaque. I paused, stared at it. That medal ceremony happened 3 years ago. I'd sent the photos to my parents. They never replied. I entered my office, where everything was right. Nothing mocked me here, no sideways glances, no backhanded comments, just the cold logic of mission and command. I opened the Helios file again on my secured terminal. Heart Tech had presented a compelling pitch on the surface. Cutting-edge AI, scalable encryption systems, minimal latency across nodes. But the deeper my team dug, the more gaps appeared. Redundancies, poor documentation, and the most obvious sign of a rushed bid, inflated peripheral spending without accountability. I knew what that meant. Either Brian was in over his head, or someone else in the company was using the project to pad pockets. Neither looked good. At 1900 hours, I received confirmation of the Heart Tech board meeting scheduled for Thursday. They didn't know I'd be attending. Not as Will Hart, the son, but as Major General William J. Hart, Director of Strategic Cyber Operations, DoD Liaison to Project Helios, and final reviewer of their compliance framework. My father would be there, Brian, too, and a table full of men who had laughed when I was called soldier. I closed the file, locked my terminal, and sat back. Part of me wanted to storm in and dismantle them, piece by piece. But that wasn't who I was. This wasn't about revenge. This was about truth, about standards, about duty. I'd spent my entire life living by those words, and this time, my family would finally have to answer to them. The next morning, my aide brought in hard copies of the Helios evaluations. I spent the day reviewing line by line, noting every inconsistency, every area where Heart Tech had cut corners or assumed they'd get a pass because of name recognition. That was the problem with old power. It relied on history. I had no use for history. Only results. That evening, I returned to my apartment just outside D.C., a modest two-bedroom near the Pentagon with a view of the river and almost no furniture. I liked it that way, quiet, controlled. I sat by the window with a cup of black coffee staring into the night. At the wedding, I thought the moment had passed, the chance to be seen, to be respected. But now I realized something else. They weren't supposed to see me at the wedding. They were meant to see me at the meeting, under full lights, under pressure, under authority. And this time, I wouldn't be the one left silent in the corner. The lobby of Heart Tech's global headquarters smelled like glass, steel, and ambition. Polished floors, vertical screens flashing achievements, and a concierge desk manned like a security checkpoint. Everything screamed success. Everything said only giants belong here, which was ironic. Because today, I wasn't here as the general's son, I was the general. My uniform was crisp, deep navy, decorated with stars and citations, impossible to ignore. Medals perfectly aligned, nameplate shining. I stepped through the doors, and silence followed like a shadow. Staff paused mid-sentence. Some stood, others just stared. The receptionist blinked 3 times before she found her voice. Good morning, sir. May I help you?" "Major General William Hart," I said, "Department of Defense Liaison for Project Helios. I'm expected." It took her 3 seconds to process the words. Then she stood, nodded, and called for an escort. As I stepped into the elevator, I could feel the air thinning. 32 floors up, behind walnut-paneled glass, was the conference room where my father and Brian were preparing for what they assumed would be just another meeting. The elevator dinged. I walked in. The door opened to a long room with a panoramic city view. Sunlight flooded the table, where 15 executives sat in dark suits, murmuring over spreadsheets and tablets. Brian was at the far end, calm, confident, until he saw me. His face didn't just fall, it cracked. He blinked, trying to process. My father, sitting beside him, turned slowly. His expression didn't shift at first. Then came the frown, and then disbelief, and then something I hadn't seen in years, uncertainty. Robert Callahan, chairman of the board, stood and smiled. "Ah, General Hart, right on time," I nodded. "Mr. Callahan." He turned to the others. "Gentlemen, this is Major General William Hart, the Department of Defense's Strategic Cyber Operations Director, and the final approver for the Helios contract. Silence. My father dropped his pen. Brian looked like he'd forgotten how to breathe. I took my seat at the center of the table, and for the first time in my life, I was at their table, not as family, but as authority. Callahan began. Project Helios is the most ambitious cyber defense infrastructure proposed to date. HeartTech's bid is top tier on paper. General Hart is here to ensure it's top tier in execution. I nodded. Thank you. Let's begin. The next 2 hours were methodical. I reviewed infrastructure claims, encryption protocols, AI models. Each time I asked precise questions, ones only someone deeply embedded in military-grade security would know to ask. Brian answered at first. His voice faltered with each slide. I pointed out the Singapore expenditure. A $61 million budget line with no attached deliverables. It's under auxiliary R&D. I raised a folder. Our internal data shows no activity tied to your Singapore lab for over 18 months. Brian flushed. We recently shifted focus. No documentation shows that, I said. And you signed this line, Mr. Hart. He looked at our father, silently begging for backup. James Hart remained still. Jaw clenched, hands folded. I moved on. There are encryption redundancies in your architecture that leave room for shadow access ports. That's unacceptable. The room was ice. Every executive could see what was happening. And this wasn't a formality. This was an audit and a reckoning. I glanced once more at my father. His face had tightened into stone. This man had called me a disappointment for turning down his company. Now he sat helpless while I dissected his work in front of his board. But I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just did the job. By the end of the meeting, Callahan was nodding gravely. Thank you, General Hart. Your insight is critical. We'll implement immediate revisions and resubmit compliance documents within the week. I stood. That's appreciated. My report will reflect today's findings. Final approval is pending correction of all discrepancies. I gathered my folders. My father finally spoke. Will. I looked at him. Calm, cold, not his son, his evaluator. Yes, sir? You're in charge of this? I am, I said, and I take it very seriously. We held each other's gaze for a beat too long. Then I turned and walked out. No applause, no handshakes, just a stunned silence behind me. As I stepped into the elevator, I let out a slow breath. I hadn't humiliated them. I hadn't needed to. The truth had done it for me. And that was enough. I didn't go back to the Pentagon that day. Instead, I found myself parked in front of a quiet overlook just outside the city, where the skyline stretched like a cold metal wave against the dusk. The boardroom was over. The numbers were on record. My part was done, but the silence that followed clung heavier than the war rooms I'd known. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown caller. I answered. Will. My mother's voice, software strained. Could you come by the house tonight? She didn't ask. She didn't apologize. She just said it. I drove without music. The roads were empty and my thoughts louder than the engine. When I arrived, the house was dark, except for a few lights in the living room. Same carved stone lions at the gate. Same perfectly trimmed hedges. But something about it all felt smaller. My father stood by the fireplace, a glass of scotch untouched in his hand. My mother sat on the edge of the sofa, nervous fingers twisting a handkerchief. Brian leaned against the window, staring out at the garden. The room smelled like polished wood, old money, and something else. Discomfort. I stepped in and waited. No salute here, no brief. just a family that never really knew how to speak plainly. My father was the first to break the silence. "You could have told us?" I let the words sit in the air. "I did," I said. "Dozens of times. Emails, invitations, photos." He looked at me sharply. "We thought you were just in operations." "I am in operations," I replied. "Strategic operations, cyber defense, the kind that keeps what you build from getting torn apart by foreign hands." My mother's voice trembled. "Willie, we never understood how high you'd risen." "That's not the part that hurts," I said. "The part that hurts is you never asked." She flinched. My father didn't move. Brian finally turned. "You made us look like fools." I looked at him. Really looked. "The truth made you look like that, not me." He clenched his jaw. "You held that power in your hands and chose to show it like a hammer." "No," I said calmly. "I showed it like a mirror." He exhaled sharply and turned back to the window. My mother stood, her voice low and aching. "You were always so quiet, so distant. We thought you were unhappy. We thought you regretted. I chose this path," I cut in. "I chose it fully, and not for recognition. But it would have meant something to hear you say you respected it, just once." My father stepped forward, his face older in the firelight than I remembered. "I was wrong," he said. "I thought you were wasting yourself. I thought success looked a certain way." He paused. "I looked down because I didn't understand the kind of burden you carry, the things you've done. I see it now." He extended his hand. I looked at it, then slowly took it. It wasn't forgiveness, it was acknowledgement. That was enough. Brian approached, slower, his pride heavy in his step. "You were always the strong one, Will. You just never needed the spotlight like I did." I didn't answer. Instead, I gave a small nod. "We're different, that's okay." The silence that followed wasn't cold, it was healing. They didn't say much else that night. We didn't resolve years of distance. We didn't hug and cry. But we sat in the same room, without masks, for the first time in a decade. Before I left, my mother handed me an envelope. Inside was a photo. Me, in uniform, standing at the NATO ceremony, hand outstretched for the medal. "We want to hang this," she said quietly. "Next to the family wall. It's time." I looked at her, then at my father. He nodded once. I tucked the photo inside my coat and walked out into the night. The air felt different. Not warmer, but real. 6 months later, I returned to the Hart family estate. The gates didn't creak like they used to. The hedges had grown in just a little. But what struck me most wasn't the place. It was how I felt walking into it. Not like an outsider, not like an invisible son, just like myself. My mother greeted me at the door, arms already outstretched. "Willie," she said with that same old softness, "you came." I hugged her tightly. Wouldn't miss it. Inside, the house felt lighter. A few voices floated in from the sitting room, laughter, clinking glasses, a piano playing something upbeat. It wasn't a gala, it wasn't a company function, it was family, real family. In the hallway I paused. The family wall stood ahead, still crowned by my father's Forbes cover, still lined with Brian's framed MBA and tech conference moments. But between them now, dead center, was a new frame. A photograph. Me, in dress uniform, accepting the NATO commendation. Below it, a simple engraved plaque. Major General William J. Hart. Integrity in silence. I stared at it for a long moment, not out of vanity, out of disbelief. My father joined me, hands in his pockets. "I had it custom made. Your mother picked the quote." "She chose well," I said quietly. He nodded. "It's taken me time, but I see it now. The work you do, the way you carry it. It's bigger than anything I ever built." He looked me square in the eye. "I'm proud of you, Will." This time, I believed him. Later, Brian found me in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, nursing a soda like we were kids again. "I fixed the Helios structure," he said. "Every weakness, every hole. Took months, but I made it bulletproof." I nodded. "I read the updates. It's solid work." He leaned back. "You didn't humiliate me, you know. You could have, but you didn't." "That wasn't the point." He paused. "I know." Then he smiled. "You think we're ever gonna be just brothers again?" "Maybe," I said. "If we stop pretending to be versions of each other." He laughed. "Deal." We walked outside to the garden. The air was cool. The grass still smelled like summer. Our parents joined us on the patio. We talked, really talked. No masks, no rankings, just stories, memories, forgiveness. Before I left, my father pulled me aside. "There's a new project coming," he said. "Not for Heart Tech, not for the military. Something we'd build together, if you want." I raised an eyebrow. He shrugged. "Something honest, something real." "I'll think about it," I said. He smiled. "That's all I ask." Back in DC, I returned to the rhythm I knew best. Code briefings, cyber drill, strategy boards. But something had shifted. Not in my work, in me. I no longer carried the weight of being misunderstood. I no longer needed to prove anything. My family finally saw me, not for who they imagined, but for who I actually was. Weeks later, a letter arrived in my Pentagon inbox, handwritten, no return address, just 5 words. "You made us proud. Dad." I pinned it above my desk, next to the operation maps and encrypted drafts. Because in the end, all we want is to be seen, to be heard. And sometimes it takes a battlefield and a boardroom to get there. But if you hold your ground long enough, they will.